It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening and this weekend so that we can spend some time together sharing and learning. As Mike was mentioning, I spent 10 years at Uchee Pines Institute, and some of you know Dr. Agatha Thrash, and I had the opportunity of learning with her and then caring for her actually in her last days and so on. My first career is emergency medicine, and then lifestyle medicine, and now most of what I'm doing is counseling and helping individuals to find freedom in the various different aspects of their lives. New Paradigm Ministries started in earnest in 2022, so we're only a couple of years old as far as the ministry is concerned, but the reason that we chose the name New Paradigm is because the message, the perspective that the Lord has given is quite different than what we have understood, how we have seen things. And as we obtain a new paradigm, it helps us to understand things in a new way. And to understand things in a new way gives you the ability to then perceive things differently, to approach things differently, and to find solutions to problems that you had not found the solutions to. And I did come with one of my 6 children. Aubrielle had her first airplane ride on the way over here, and so she was excited about that, and I'm glad to have her with me. I usually try to travel with one family member, but I tell them you have to be old enough to be able to sit through a weekend of meetings and prove that that you can do so. Then you can get on the rotating list of traveling with Daddy, and so she's finally made the list. So God is good. So we're going to dive into the law of life, and we are going to be looking at how, what's the cause of disease as well. But we're going to get there in a way that is much different than you've ever seen in a health presentation. So, is there a problem here? That's slightly a problem. Yeah, it's a small problem. You wake up in the morning and you walk outside and you realize that half of your house is, sitting over a 50-foot chasm. There was apparently some poor planning when it came to the foundation of the home. It doesn't matter how well you build on top of the foundation if the foundation is not good. The foundation has to be good. And then if the foundation is good, you can build whatever you want on top of it. It can work. But you got to have a good foundation, and so we need to have a good foundation as well. And a good foundation is a foundation that cannot move. Right? It's a foundation that will not move. I'm trying to remember where it is, which city. I don't remember if it was New York, Chicago, I can't remember. It's a big city that builds skyscrapers, and they built a skyscraper, and maybe it was California. It might have been California, but anyways, they built a skyscraper, and then after they built it, and it was, 50, 60 some stories tall, slight problems started happening. They noticed cracks in the basement and the pillars and all that kind of stuff. And as they surveyed it, they figured out that after a few years, it was tipping over by about 29 inches at the top from what it had been originally. Well, they thought that 150 feet of foundation, drilling into the core and pouring a foundation 150 feet deep would be sufficient for this size of building. The only problem is that if you want to get to the core, where there is firm bedrock that you can get into, you have to go 250 feet. And so with all the weight of the building on the ground and everything below it, it was starting to tip. And so now they have to post-engineer how they're going to fill in all of the rest of it down to 250 feet and get into bedrock. So you want to start with a good foundation, and we also want to start with a good foundation. And when we're looking at a foundation, we want to build upon law, because law doesn't change. Everything that functions is governed by law, and all laws that govern function are unchangeable. And that means that function is unchangeable, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing, right? It's good that the way things function don't change. If all of a sudden water turned at random times turned from liquid to solid, and then at other times to gas, to a gaseous mixture, and so on, if all of that happened randomly, well, you and I would be dead. Because we might have the nice liquid water that we need inside of the body, and then all of a sudden it crystallizes and we're frozen, and then it turns into a gas, and then we blow up, and so on. It's good that things function according to law. And when we think about things functioning according to law, there is a fundamental law by which all things function. This is the very basis. If we just dig down to the bedrock and we say, okay, what is the most foundational law of everything that exists and functions? It's the fundamental law, and it has two parts to it, and that is that nothing exists or functions from itself, and nothing exists and functions for itself. Right? Nothing exists or functions from itself, and nothing exists or functions for itself. So that means that everything is dependent. It has needs. Everything has needs. The chair has needs. The piano has needs. You and I have needs. It's just what the thing is determines what needs that it has. And so everything is dependent upon some kind of resource, some kind of material, some kind of power outside of itself in order to exist, function, and if it lives, to have life. And everything then takes those things, those resources and power, and uses it and then does something with it. Even a rock functions according to this fundamental law. It will take of the heat that comes from the sun during the daytime, and it will give that heat away during the nighttime, so that the lizard that lives around that rock cannot get fried during the daytime and not freeze during the nighttime. So even a rock is operating according to this law, but definitely things that live operate according to this fundamental law. And the fundamental law, if we break it down just into a simple aspect, it is that everything takes to give. Everything takes to give. That's just how things function. And this is the law of life. And we're going to be looking at how this law applies to health. We're going to look at how this law applies to mental health. We're going to look at how this law applies to relationships and so on. Now, if everything takes to give, then everything functions like a channel. And a channel, of course, has an entrance, and a channel has an exit. And the taking is always at the entrance, and the giving is always at the exit. And with this law, this fundamental law, from it comes the law of cause and effect. And that is that the cause always comes at the beginning of the channel, and the effect is always at the end of the channel. So it's never the other way around. It's always this way. It always functions this way. It never functions differently. And every bit of anything functions as a channel. A single atom functions according to this law. Subatomic particles function according to this law. Molecules function according to this law. Cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, organisms, individuals, and so on function according to this law, and everything functions according to as a channel. So everything takes to give, and everything takes in one place and then gives in another place. Everything takes in one place and gives in another place. So, do you function that way? Do you take in one place and you give in another place? Yeah, yeah. Just think of food. I'm not going to go into details because, but anyways, you take food in one place and you give food away in another place. And something else takes of that food that you gave away and it's going to use it as food that it's going to take in, but it's going to give some other stuff out and so on and so forth, right? But you don't give where you take and you don't take where you give. It's one way, right? And it happens in one way. It doesn't go both ways. Now here's a nice picture of a waterfall falling up, right? And that is a real occurrence. It just happens to be in a place where there is significant wind currents coming through. And the wind actually catches most of the water of that waterfall and throws it back up the mountain. So unusual occurrence, but without interference and external force, that's going to continue falling down. So nothing gives where it takes from, and nothing takes where it gives to. This is unidirectional. You see that in a river. The river is going from uphill to downhill. And you see that in wires carrying electricity. Electricity is going to flow in one direction. And you see that in hoses that are carrying fluid and whatever. That's going to go from the source, and then it's going to go where it's going to. Yes, you could potentially turn the hose around, but now you're going to be taking in one place and giving in another place. You can't give where you took, and you can't take where you give. Right? So, while every individual thing functions as a channel taking to give, well, there's other components that will take to give and take to give and take to give. And when you put all of those together, actually everything functions in a circuit. Electricity functions in a circuit. If you don't have a circuit, it's not going to work. Water in the hydrological cycle, it functions in a circuit. Your body systems like circulation, even your nervous system and so on, functions in a circuit. So once you get enough of those channels together, then they'll come together and they'll function in a circuit. And so there must be an order to every function, and the order of that function never changes. And when the order is correct, then everything functions well. Things function well when the order is correct. When the order is incorrect, then there's dysfunction. And what is truth? Truth is information that puts things in the correct order. Right? It's information that puts things in the correct order so that they function. Error is information that puts things in the wrong order so that there's dysfunction. So here's a nice way that we can evaluate truth. Some people talk about my truth, your truth, their truth, the other truth, and so on. But can you evaluate that? Can you actually put it to the test and say, okay, well, does this actually fit with truth? Well, the answer is yes, and that is that truth will put things in the order so that it functions. So if you have the truth, it will work. It will work. If you have error, it will not work. And if what you think is truth is not working, question whether it's the truth. Question whether it's the truth, because truth always works. So there's gravity. That's a law, natural law. It's absolute. It doesn't change. Now, our understanding of it might change, but it doesn't change. Newton thought of it in regards to an attraction between two objects like magnets. And you have a big magnet and a little magnet based upon the mass of that object. And, and so the bigger the mass, the greater the attraction there was between the two objects. Well, Einstein came along, and Einstein said, no, that's kind of elementary. Of course, that's what Einstein thought about most things. And anyway, he said, no, really what's happening is mass actually warps space. And so it's like getting a loose trampoline, a very loose trampoline, and you stick a bowling ball on there, and the trampoline's going to go around the bowling ball. and you stick a softball on there, and it's going to go whoop a little bit under that softball. And if you get those two close enough to each other, then the one whoop for the bowling ball and the other whoop for the softball are going to start causing them to go towards each other until they meet and then they hold there, right? So Einstein was saying, no, mass actually warps space, and then it attracts two objects to each other. Whatever. Does it really matter? No, what matters is gravity works. And every time you try gravity, it's going to work. And it works the way that it is because it's absolute and it doesn't change. And it's the same thing with the laws of thermodynamics. They're absolute. Our understanding of them might change, but it doesn't actually change the laws of thermodynamics. Cause and effect is absolute. And again, our understanding of it might change, but it doesn't change. And it is a good thing that things do not change. Every function, again, governed by law, is unchangeable. Right? Laws that govern function are unchangeable. And that means now we can experiment. And we can predict outcomes. It's nice to have that. We flew on an airplane. Actually, we flew on two airplanes on the way over here, from Missouri to Dallas, and then from Dallas to Spokane, and the reason that we could fly in an airplane is because there's predictability, there's unchangeability in the laws that govern function, and scientists and others have been able to look at it, experiment with it, and figure out better designs and so on and so forth so that we can fly and we can explore space and we can go on submarines down into the oceans. And wow, they've developed batteries and robots and all that kind of stuff. All of that's possible because law doesn't change. It's fixed. And function doesn't change. It's fixed. And that's good. Now, when we consider us as humans and health, and function is when we're on the road, and when you're functioning, it's comfortable. Mm-hmm. Now, there's certain things that you need in order to function. You've got things like oxygen and water and nutrients and sunlight and warmth and so on. All of these are various different things that you need, and no, that's not an exhaustive list, just a representative one. And so you need these various different things in order for you to live, in order for you to function, and in order to have comfort. Now, what defines whether you're on the road or whether you're off the road? Because there's a limit. There's a limit to the road, and then you get off the road. What is it that defines the limit of the road? Any thoughts? Okay. All right. So yes, the rumble strips let you know you got off the road, right? You're where you're not supposed to be. That's true. I hate rumble strips, but I'm glad for them because I'm alive because of rumble strips. Right. Okay. All right. So yes, there's parameters of the road itself, and in this particular analogy, the parameters of the road is going to be law. Law is going to define whether you're on the road or whether you're off the road. Right. And there's laws that govern the function of all these different things. As a human, you need a certain amount of oxygen. Some people are surprised to think that you can actually have damage if you have too much oxygen. Yes, you can. You can, as a human being, have too much oxygen, and you can have damage associated with that. But you can definitely have too little. And so there are those parameters, the upper limits and the lower limits of normal. And same thing with water, same thing with the various different nutrients, whether it's sodium, potassium, chloride, boron, or whatever else that you have in the system that you need. Sunlight as well, you can be burned to a crisp. That's not so healthy. But you can be devoid of sun exposure, and that's not going to be healthy either. And then you can freeze and you can burn and so on. Once you get off the road, you start to experience dysfunction because function is on the road, so when you get off, you get dysfunction. And when you get off the road, there's discomfort, uncomfortable. So let's take warmth as our example. And there is a law of body temperature, and our body temperatures are around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. There's some variation there. If you're on the British system, then it's 37 degrees If you ever wondered why we got to 98.6, it's because it was a British thing, and it was 37, so they marked it right at 37. And anybody know what the temperature is for a fever? All right. So an official temperature for a fever is 100.4. Why is it 100.4? Because that's 38 degrees Celsius. So in the British system, it was 1 degree Celsius above what your normal is, and so on. So in our imperial system, we had to kind of adjust that. But so there's a law that governs, the upper limit and the lower limit, and so on. And let's say that you go above the upper limit of the law that governs your body temperature. Now, how do you feel? Yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. And what word do we usually give to that certain feeling of discomfort? All right. Fever. Yes. So we might say that we're feverish. Some people might say that they feel hot. All right. So yes, you have a fever and you feel hot. So you're going to have that discomfort that's there. And that discomfort is there to let you know something's wrong so that you can do something about it. So when you're feeling hot and you're feeling feverish, well, you take off some extra layers of clothes. You fan yourself. You drink something cool. You go out and roll around in the snow like Aubrielle wants to, and so on. Right? If your temperature goes down below the lower limits of normal, now how do you feel? Cold. Right? And now you feel discomfort, and that discomfort is to motivate you to do something about it so that you can get comfortable again. You and I could care less about law, really. How many people go around thinking, all right, well, what's the upper limit of normal for cadmium levels in my body? Nobody. I mean, you can measure it, and you can do blood tests for it, and you can figure this out, and nobody cares. But what we care about is how we feel. Okay? So it's interesting that how we feel is tied to the law, and once we get outside of the law, it doesn't feel good, so that we're motivated to do something about it so that we can feel good again. So we can warm up. So that when we get outside of the law, it's the rumble strips, as you mentioned. Right? So the rumble strips hit you, and the rumble strips we call symptoms. Symptoms are the rumble strips of getting outside off the road, and now we can recognize things are not working the way that they're supposed to. So when you have pain, that's an indicator something's wrong. When you are coughing and you have a runny nose, or you have a sore throat, or you have a fever, or you're feeling weak and you're fatigued, and so on and so forth, all of those are signs that the law, you're getting outside of the law, and it's warning you that there's a problem. Now, if you don't just stop at symptoms, but you keep varying away from the road further, where are you going to get to next? Well, eventually, yes. Exactly. We're getting there, but we're going to stop on one stop along the way, and that is disease. Right? So your dysfunction continues to get worse the farther you get off the road, and you're eventually going to get to disease, where it's not just that you feel hot, but now you are dehydrating. Your systems are starting to respond in negative ways to this dehydration and the heat exposure, and now you have heat exhaustion or heat stroke, and your head is killing you, and your lips are dry and cracked, and you're feeling so horrible, and you're feeling very weak, and so on, and it's difficult to think clearly. You know that there's a big problem. And it feels really bad. Why? Because you really need to do something about it right now in order to get back within the confines of the law so that you don't get to that next point of death. Right? And it's the same in the opposite direction. Frostbite, chilblains, other things of that nature where it's too cold, it's really damaging the tissues, it really feels bad because you really need to do something about it right away. or else it's going to go on to the inevitable, which is if you get far enough off the road, then you're going to go to progressive dysfunction until you get to no function, right, once you get off the road. So law is important, right? It's important to understand how law works in our context as well. Now, every person has the same basic needs. Everyone does, right? And we need chemicals. So we need oxygen, we need water, we need various different nutrients, and we need them in various certain levels. We also need a certain temperature or warmth. We need a certain pressure of the environment that we're in. Anybody remember the guy that a few years ago broke the world record in skydiving? Yeah, he went up in like a space thing. I mean, he had a big balloon and whatever, and then he had some kind of space module that he was in, and then he jumped out of it, but he didn't jump out of it just with regular skydiving equipment. He had a spacesuit on. Yeah, right? Because he was up so high. When you get up so high, gravitational force is so little, and the environmental pressure and so on is so little, that if you jump out at that, now your body temperature is going to cause any of the water and the fluids inside your system to boil, because there's so little pressure outside in order to keep it together in a liquid state. And so you boil to death just at body temperature at heights like that. So you need a certain pressure in order to live as well. And you need what you need because you are what you are. Right? And different things have different needs, and you cannot change what you are, therefore you cannot change what you need. Or if you don't see it that way, you can turn it around and look at it backwards and say, okay, I can't change what I need, therefore I cannot change what I am. Right. You can't just change the fact that you need oxygen, you just can't change the fact that you need water and that you need nutrients and so on. So everything that you need is outside of you. It's outside of you. But if it stays outside of you, it won't do you any good. It will only do you good if it comes inside. It will only do you good if it comes inside. If it stays outside, it's not going to do you any good. So, if it remains close but doesn't come inside of you, you're going to die. It's just not going to work. So if you have that oxygen and that oxygen stays right at your nose, you're going to die. The only way that you're going to live is if what? All right, as if that oxygen gets inside of you and becomes a part of you, then you can live. If that water stays right at your lips, you're going to die. The only way you're going to live is if it comes inside and becomes a part of you. And that's true for everything that you need. Everything you need must be brought into yourself by yourself. Right? Must be brought into yourself by yourself. So you need oxygen so you breathe. You need water so you drink. You need food so you eat. Right? So all of these actions that we have are there in order for us to bring in what we need so that we can function. Right? We can live. Again, everything takes in order to give. Everything functions as a channel, has an entrance and an exit. And again, the cause is going to be at the taking side, and the effect is going to be on the giving side. It always functions that way, and we need to keep that in mind. Now, there is a law of cause and effect, and that is that every effect has a cause, and every cause produces an effect. That if the effect is there, then the cause is also there. Okay? The effect is there, the cause is also there, because if you remove the cause, the effect has to go away. Because the cause is where the power is coming from. It's where the materials are coming from. It's where the resources are coming from that are necessary in order for the effect to be present. So if the cause is good, the effect will be what? Good. And if the cause is bad, the effect is going to be bad. So you can know whether the cause is good or not by the effect. So you can trace it backwards. You can look at the effect and go, okay, was this a good effect or was this a bad effect? And by the effect, you can trace it backwards and see whether the cause was good or not. And if you've got a good cause, then it's going to cause function, and if you have a bad cause, then it's going to result in dysfunction. Make sense? Yep, simple enough? I know I'm kind of going fast. I have 4 hours of material to boil down at lunch. I got material we got to cover so that we understand these things. So everything in nature that functions needs at least two elements. It needs something that generates or enables the function, and it needs something that sustains or perpetuates the function. So in living systems, there's an electrical impulse that's needed to initiate the function, and then there is fuel or chemistry that is needed to perpetuate or sustain that function. And it doesn't matter what the living system is, it always has a combination of electricity and chemistry. It's always got that combination. Even plants have germination. I don't know if you're aware of this, but when a plant germinates, when you get a seed and you plant it on the ground and so on, and it starts to grow, well, that very beginning of that growing process, there's an electrical impulse that happens. Right? And then, of course, there needs to be the correct nutrients and everything there in order for it to continue in its function. So you have an electrical impulse at the initiation of the function, and then you have chemistry at the perpetuation or the continuation of that function. And every cell in your body functions that way. Every cell must have not only the fuel, but it also must have the spark. It must have the resources and the power, the fuel and the spark in order to get it going. And since everything functions according to the law, the fundamental law of taking to give, then it's the cell's own responsibility to take those resources in, to take that power in, and then to do something with it, to produce something with it, the product. Right? And your function as a human being is the sum of all of the functions of your individual cells. Right? All of your different cells, your function as an individual, as the body, is dependent upon the individual function of each of the different cells. Now, where is the body controlled through? Or what is the controlling mechanism for the body? Okay. All right. So we have the brain, right, that's represented here. And what happens is you have an electrical impulse, and the electrical impulse always begins up here in the cortex, the outer part of the brain. And so that electrical impulse begins in the cortex. That impulse is taken down through the central part of the brain in what we call the limbic system. And there in the limbic system, the impulse is then, it crosses to the opposite side. It then goes down through the brainstem, through the spinal cord, to the different parts of the body. And those electrical impulses from the brain are going to control the movement of your muscles. It's going to control processes in the body like digestion. It's going to control glands and their secretion of hormones and so on and so forth. But in order for you to have a proper controlling mechanism, not only does it have to send signals out, but it has to receive information back from the system in order to be able to control and regulate. So there is information that is sent back from the muscles, that is sent back from the digestive system, from the endocrine organs, and so on, and that information is also sent back then eventually to the cortex in order to evaluate that information and then respond to it. And the brain is arranged in such a marvelous way that you have one spot in the brain that is associated with one spot in the body. So if somebody's doing pin the tail on the donkey and you're the one that's blindfolded and they pin you, the game got a little mixed up, but they pin you somewhere and you were the donkey and you were blindfolded, well, even though you were blindfolded, you would still know where they pinned you. because every part in the body has a representation up here in the brain, and it's wired specifically so that you poke here, you get a signal up here. You poke here, you get a signal over here. In fact, if you poke the feet, it's up inside. Left foot would be upper, inner, middle. Here you go. So sensation of your toes is going to be the upper, inner, middle aspect of the brain. Sensation from your lips is going to be from here out in the outer part. And so if you accidentally kick yourself in the face, then you will feel part of it over here in this part of the brain and the other part of it over here in that part of the brain. And then the motor cortex of the tongue is going to take over, maybe, and and so on. So it's very well regulated, and it's regulated in the same way in every human being, that has developed like that. Now, thoughts begin in the cortex, this outer part of the brain where all of your the cell structure is. The main part of the neurons is right there in the cortex, where the electrical impulse is generated, and then that again is going to be electrical impulse that is sent down to the limbic system. There, when it's received in the limbic system, it's going to cause the production of certain neurotransmitters or the release of certain neurotransmitters. So now you're dealing with chemistry. That chemistry is going to be received and then reflected back to the cortex so that you can get feedback from what was going on with the thought. So you can have a thought that comes, boom, just like that. It comes and it's gone. But the chemistry that's produced in response to that thought lasts for a while. And so you can sit there and you can chew on the feeling of it for a while, even though it's difficult to identify what the thought was that came zipping by that was, the initiation of that thing. So you eventually will have your emotions and your feelings as the cortex receives the information that came from the limbic system, from the chemistry that was produced there. So your reason, judgment, intellect, forethought, all of that kind of stuff is going to be a function of the cortex. Your feelings and your emotions plus your automatic responses, your subconscious control of digestion, urine production, fluid volume, other things like that happens here in the more central part of the brain. But there's nothing that you feel down here. Feeling comes really in the cortex when that information comes back to the cortex. Now, when we think of thoughts, because we need to think of thoughts, thinking is what humans do most. You do more thinking than you do breathing. And there are so many thoughts that are running through your head all the time. And we are always thinking. There's never a time when we're not thinking. Even when we're in surgery and we're under anesthesia, there's still thinking that's happening. You're just amnestic to it. You're not aware of it. It's not a conscious thing. So the conscious mind is essentially turned off by the anesthesia, but the unconscious mind is very active, very active. And in fact, if you look at the electrical activity of the brain of somebody that's under surgery that is, being cut open and all that kind of stuff, you'll see that the brain activity, the electrical activity, is similar to somebody being awake and going through something like that. It's just you're not conscious of it, so you don't perceive the pain and so on and so forth, but the thinking and electrical activity is definitely still happening. So we're always thinking, but the question is, what are thoughts? What are thoughts? Okay. All right. So there's electricity on the wire going to the lights. Is it thinking? there's electricity going to the computer. Is it thinking? Yeah, it turns it on. But it doesn't make it think. Okay. So no, it's not the electricity. Although electricity is involved in part of it, but, we don't deny that. But it can't just be the electricity. Ideas, okay, yes. Ideas are thoughts. Okay, response to stimulus. All right. Okay, it needs a source. All right. Okay. So is it something that's spiritual? All right. Where do thoughts come from? Where do they start? Where does it begin? Wherever thoughts start, that's where you'll find the human begins. That's where you'll find that human function begins. And the question is, what do thoughts do? Okay. Yes. The thoughts tell us something. How much of what you do is the response of thoughts? Everything. Everything you do is the response of thoughts. How much of, if you look around you, how much of what you see around you is the result of thought? What about the, right, result of thought? Right? How much of what you look around you, how much of what you see is the result of thoughts? Everything. Everything. So, is there anything that is done that is not done because of thought? No. So, thought does everything. There's no exception. Thought does everything. So everything you do is the effect of your thoughts, and they do everything else. All right, next question. Can the brain think? Okay. All right. Yes. Yes. Can the brain matter itself think? Okay. All right. So if the matter that makes up the brain doesn't think, but we do, then is it just the brain, or is it more than the brain? More than the brain. Yeah. Because the brain is composed of chemistry. Yeah. And it has chemical reactions. And chemical reactions are dependent upon outside factors to function. What kind of materials, what kind of power, what kind of resources, what kind of environmental pressure, temperature, those types of things, right? And it can only function according to the laws that govern their function. And chemistry can absorb information. Chemistry can store information. Chemistry can transmit information. Information is transmitted via wires, right? That's made of chemistry. It's made of molecules, atoms, and so on. And they can transmit that information. You can store information in a hard drive. It's physical. It's made of chemicals. And that information can be stored there. DNA is an incredible storage device. Incredible storage device. It's a physical structure that contains all sorts of information packed into a space we can't even imagine. Right? But it's physical, and it can contain, it can absorb, it can transmit information. Chemistry can, right? Like the computer hardware. But how many thoughts can the brain itself think? Yeah, none. Right? So chemical elements cannot feel. Tell me an atom on a periodic chart of elements, an element that's there. Tell me an element that can feel. And is not everything made up of one of or multiple of a combination of those atoms or those elements. Sure, right? So chemicals cannot choose. Chemicals cannot make decisions. Chemicals cannot destroy themselves. Chemicals cannot have consciousness. Chemicals cannot have cognitive abilities, morals, realize something and then like it or not like it. Right? Chemical elements cannot organize themselves. They cannot regulate themselves. They cannot act for themselves. Now, chemistry can react to what is done to it, for sure, clearly, but it cannot act for itself. And chemical elements cannot look into the mirror and study themselves and know why they are the way that they are. All of that is impossible for chemical elements. And the brain is made of, protons, neutrons, electrons, and, atoms and molecules and so on and so forth. And in a structure, very, very well organized structure. But anything that's made of chemicals doesn't have any of those capacities. But humans we do have chemistry, and we do all of those things that chemistry cannot do, and yet we are not marionette dolls where something just is moving us and so on and so forth from the outside. Humans not only react, but we can act. We can act for ourselves. And that's something that chemistry cannot do. It cannot act for itself. So where do these abilities come from if it's not from chemistry? Now there's other needs that we have. We need, anybody here need love? Yeah? Okay. Good. One hand. You got it. You got it. That's right. Anybody need truth? Yeah? Okay. Anybody need justice? When injustice is being done? Yeah? Anybody need compassion? Yeah? Does anybody need harmony? Right? Getting along with others? Yeah? Okay. Anybody need security? Yeah? So, how many of those needs are physical? So is love physical? Can we boil it down? Can we find the chemical equation for it? Concentrate it, purify it, inject it in somebody, and now they love. Now they feel love, and they have love, and they can give love. Right? Or we can take compassion, and we can boil it down, and we can find the serum for it, and we can get a pill. I tell you, if I could figure this out, I would be the richest man in the world. Bill Gates would be like, if I could come up with a love pill, I could manufacture that. Anybody take it, and now they have love? No? No. All right, none of those are physical. So those are all spiritual needs. All right. What's that? Yeah. Yes. Yes. There's some spiritual things that you get from some of the pills that you take. It changes what should I say? It does affect the chemistry, so it affects how you feel. And since people are used to thinking according to how they feel, then when you change how you feel, then you tend to change how you think. But chemistry can never actually control thoughts. So, like the road, we need harmony, security, compassion, truth, justice, love, and so on and so forth. And there's a law that governs the function of these various different things, but interestingly enough, when it comes to the spiritual needs, there is no upper limit. There's no upper limit. You can never have too much love. You can never have too much truth. You can never have too much justice. You can never have too much security, or so on and so forth. You can only have too little. Right? And when you get too little, that's when you start having dysfunction and discomfort. And yes, when you have too little love, you can have symptoms. And yes, when you have too little love, you can end up with disease. And yes, if you don't have enough love, you can die. What if you're always taking and not giving? Not possible. because function is not a choice. You can't choose how you function. And you can't choose whether you function according to the law of taking to give or not. You can't help it. You do function according to taking to give. And so you cannot actually keep anything to yourself, because everything that composes you is taken from somewhere else, and you will eventually be composed, and you will give it away, everything. So, everything you need must be brought into yourself by yourself. So you need oxygen so you breathe, you need water so you drink, you need food so you eat, you need love so you... Alright, so you need oxygen so you oxygen. You need water so you water. You need food so you food. So therefore you need love so you love. I'm not picking on you. It's every audience that I speak to. Same answer. All right, so it doesn't work that way. If you need oxygen, then you give oxygen, and therefore you get oxygen. So how it works? So you need oxygen, so you breathe out. And now you've just supplied your need for oxygen. Is that how it works? No. You need water, so you spew it out, and so now that supplied your need, right? No, you need food, so you get rid of it, and now you supplied the need, right? No, it doesn't work that way. So we're starting to descend into the delusion, right? Starting to descend into the delusion. Every one of us is delusional. We were born delusional. We just didn't know it. But we're going to discover it this weekend. So we think that because we need love, we must give love. We think that because we need love, we must give love. It's a delusion. It can never work. It will always leave you empty, and emptier than what you were before. The question is, why do we think that way, and what's actually going on, and we're going to get into that tomorrow. So, you need oxygen so you breathe, you need water so you drink, you need food so you eat, you need love so you... Alright, let's use this as an example. You were having a bad day, you came home from that bad day, and you stopped at the mailbox, and there happened to be mail. And instead of being just a whole bunch of bills, there was a letter, and that was a letter handwritten from somebody, and it happened to be from the right somebody, whoever that somebody is. And you open the letter, and it says "Dear," and it has your name on it. And I've been thinking about you, can't get you off my mind, thinking about the last time we spent together, and when we'll be together again in the future, and so on, and all sorts of mushy stuff that we won't say in the presence of two 10-year-olds. And and so on, and love, their name signed at the bottom, XOXO, and whatever. So how do you feel after reading the letter? Yeah, you feel love, right? So how much love was in the paper? How much love was in the ink? How much love was in the glue? How much love was in the stamp? No? Right? So how'd you go from having a bad day and feeling bad to then feeling love? What happened? What was the process? Okay. So it's a process of thinking. So that paper contains information, because physical things can absorb, contain, and transmit information. So that paper, that ink, and so on, and those scribbles and whatever that was on there, you have been taught that this shape means this letter, and these letters together means this word, and that word has this meaning, and when you put those words together, then it has this meaning, and you read the whole thing, and you understand that it means that person that it came to loves you, and you believe it. You believe it. Now, it's yours. Right? So it's a process of thought. It's a process of thinking, and it requires belief in there. If you don't believe it, if it had all of that nice, yummy stuff on there, and it was all lovey-dovey and all that kind of stuff, and it was signed at the bottom, your used car dealer, please come tomorrow. Would you feel loved? No, of course not. Because you recognize it does not represent love, and so you don't believe it, and so you don't take it in as love. Right? So you have to believe it, and it's a process of thinking that brings in the love that you need. Now, you and I have physical needs, and there are alarm systems in relation to those different needs. So hunger tells you that you are lacking food. Thirst tells you are lacking water. Fatigue tells you are lacking energy or sleep. Chills tells you are lacking warmth. Suffocation tells you are lacking oxygen or air. Yes. Okay. So all of those are physical symptoms that shows that the body is lacking something. It's like the gas gauge on the vehicle. Now, for whom is the gas gauge on the vehicle? All right. So the gauge is for the driver. The gauge is not for the vehicle. Because if the vehicle could provide its own gas, there would be no need for a gauge. It's the driver that has to provide the gas for the vehicle, and hence there is a separate entity. There must be something to show that separate entity that there's the need to then take care of and fulfill that need. Right? So the symptoms, the hunger, thirst, fatigue, chill, suffocation, and whatever symptoms you have, prove that the body cannot provide for its own needs. It can't source what it needs. It can only manifest that it's a need. Right? And so there must be something that controls the body and that supplies its needs, just like there must be a driver of the car that the gas gauge and the speedometer and so on and so forth are indicating to, so that it can drive the vehicle well. Now, a physical thing can only take in or absorb what it needs if it's brought close to it. If you bring the water and you leave it a centimeter away from your body, it's not going to do anything. If you swallowed the water and it never actually touched the edges of your digestive tract, how much of it would you absorb? None. It's got to touch it. It's got to be there. It's got to be close to it. Then it can absorb it in. Right? Physical things, however, cannot go and search for and find what they need and take it in. It's impossible. Right? So, what is it in you and I that receives those signals of the symptoms, that recognizes what is needed, that goes and search for what is needed, and then brings it close to the body so that the body can absorb it? The brain is chemistry. It's the very thing that needs those things. And therefore, the very thing that cannot actually go into it. Okay? So, why do we have spiritual needs? Do your liver cells need justice? Do your kidney cells need respect? Does your heart cells need love? Do your neurons need security? Where do your thoughts come from? Those are all questions that we need to know, we need to understand, we need to answer. And these are things that are generally unknown to us. We haven't thought about this. We haven't dug, down to the basis to understand these things. But we need to. So you and I need freedom. We need security, knowledge, understanding, loyalty, confirmation, joy, harmony, mercy, justice, truth, responsibility, morality, wisdom, recognition, appreciation, happiness, peace, and the list can go on. It's a long list, right? All of those are various different things that we need. But there's not a single molecule, there's no combination of molecules that needs security and loyalty and peace and anything else up here. None. So all of those needs are spiritual, and the spiritual needs reveal the presence of a spiritual entity. There has to be the presence of a spiritual entity if there are spiritual needs. And we find that in the Bible in Genesis 2 and verse 7 with the creation of man. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. Right? So the dust, which is quite simple, became a very complex body. And the breath, which is very simple, became a very complex spirit. And the combination of the two is the soul. You do not have a soul, you are the soul. And a soul, there's not three entities within you, body, spirit, and soul, but the soul is you, and it's made up of two entities. It's made up of body, and it's made up of spirit. Just like a computer is made up of software and hardware. If you don't have the software, the hardware is not going to do anything. If you don't have the hardware, the software can't do anything. They only have function when it's together, and it's the same thing with you and I. You've got a spirit, you have a body, but there is no function unless the spirit and the body are together and working together. But when you have a spirit and you have a body, just like hardware and software, when you bring hardware and software together in a computer, software doesn't stop being software, and hardware doesn't stop being hardware. And they each have their different components of the overall function. But there's no function unless they're together. And it's the same thing with you and I. We have a spirit, we have a body, and when it's brought together, and now there's a soul, the spirit doesn't stop being spirit, and the body doesn't stop being body, and each of them have different components of the overall function, but there's only function when they're together. Only function when they're together. So the body, that's the chemical part of us. It interacts with the physical world, it stores information, it sends information up to the cortex, and then there's the spirit, which is spiritual, and it interacts with the spiritual world, and it receives spiritual information, and it imparts power to the body and controls the body's actions. And then you have the soul, and the soul is the combination of both the spirit and the body. It's the union of the body and the spirit, and it's the soul that is conscious, that can think and reason and evaluate and understand, and so on. You are a soul. And if we would take any word that we commonly use today and apply it to that, I would use the word mind. It's the mind, right? Because the mind is more than just the brain. It's not just the physical matter that's there. It's the spirit and the physical components of the brain and the central and peripheral nervous system and so on with its function, right? And so you need oxygen, water, food, and warmth. You do not need suffocation, dehydration, starvation, freezing, or burning. Anybody want any of those? No? You're like, oh yeah, give me some of that. No? Okay. And you need love, acceptance, respect, honor, truth, justice, mercy, compassion, and so on. You do not need selfishness, rejection, disrespect, dishonor, lies, injustice, cruelty, indifference. You don't need that. Right. So everything you need is good. Everything you need is good. And when supplied, it allows you to function properly. You don't have a single need that is bad. You don't have a single need that is bad. Every need that you have is a good need. So, God created you with a need for what is good. He never created you with a need for what is bad, ever. And in fact, you can only pursue what you need. You can only pursue what is good. You cannot pursue what is contrary to your needs or what is bad. And the red flags are starting to pop up, in people's minds. That's because I haven't gotten to the next word. Unless you're in a state of deception. believing that you need what you don't need. Right? And if you're put under circumstances that require you to renounce some need, you will always renounce the lesser need in order to retain the greater need. If you're ever put in a situation where you have to choose between needs, you're always going to go after the greater need and continue to supply it rather than the lesser need. For example, what's this guy doing? Fasting. Mahatma Gandhi. So he's fasting. Now, is food a need? Yes. Is it the greatest need? No. If it was, you could never renounce it. But he is renouncing it. And others have renounced it to the point of death. Right? Others have renounced it to the point of death. Now, physical needs fulfill life. But spiritual needs fulfill purpose. Right? Life versus purpose. And if there is ever a conflict between the spiritual and the physical, who is it that wins? Have you ever heard of or known of anybody who, by their own choice, ended their life? Yes. Wow. If it was suicide, the reason that they did end their life was because they already lost their purpose. And there's no reason to live without purpose. Life only serves in order to fulfill purpose. Right? So you can renounce the lesser, but you can never renounce the greater. And if you have lost purpose, you've lost your reason to live. Right? Now, others have lost their lives by choice because they had purpose. And they were in a situation where they were told, if you continue in your way and the way you understand things, we will kill you. But if you concede and you do things our way, then we'll let you live. And because they had purpose in what they believed, they renounced life for the sake of purpose. So if you're ever pitted between spiritual and physical needs, the spiritual will always win because it's the most important to us. We might not think about it all the time, but it does drive our decisions, does drive our choices. And a proof that we are more than just matter is that we can renounce the most important physical aspect, and that is life. We can renounce life. So the spiritual needs are always more important and always come before the physical needs. And so we can renounce life, whether that's in suicide and martyrdom and sacrifice for something, some purpose, but we can never give up purpose. The moment you lose purpose, you lose everything. Right? And everything that gives purpose is spiritual, not physical. So what's the difference between a dead person and a living person? In a dead person, there's no electrical activity. In a living person, there's electrical activity. And the question is, where does that electrical activity come from? Does it come from the brain? Or does it come from elsewhere? From elsewhere. It comes from the spirit. Right? It's the spirit that imparts the electrical activity of the brain. So it's the software that's driving the hardware, right, in that system. And so since we have body and we have spirit, and the combination of the two is the soul or the mind, then that can function, and as long as the spirit is in combination with the brain, then things are going to work well. But if the spirit separates from that, then there's no more electrical activity, and you have both a dead body and a dead spirit. Now, what are the different functions of the different components of the spirit and the body? Well, the body, again, it can accept, it can absorb, it can store, and it can transmit information. And so the body can transmit information in regards to the various different levels of chemicals and pressure in the arterial system and so on and so forth. It can send that information. It gets up to the cortex. The spirit receives that information. It evaluates that information, and then it makes a decision based upon that information. And the decision is going to then be what initiates the electrical activity in the cortex, and then sending that to whatever part of the body in order to control the responses there. So when the body sends information up to the spirit, we might think of it as a request, but when the spirit sends information to the body, that is definitely a command. The body has no capacity to not do what the spirit tells it to do unless the body just doesn't have the capacity to do it. Right? There's not a communication line between the two because the spinal cord has been broken, and so therefore the spirit can't control the function of the toes and the movement of the muscles below that injury, or that you don't have enough nutrients and you are completely emaciated and wasted, and you might want to move, but you don't have the nutrient capacity in order to be able to actually do it. Right? So as long as the body has the capacity, it will do whatever the spirit commands it to do, whatever the mind says to do. So hunger, thirst, fatigue, chill, suffocation are signals sent by the body to the spirit so the spirit can look for and supply what the body needs. The body cannot supply its own needs, and it is the spirit that moves the body, that searches for the physical things that we need, that makes the body bring those things in, so causes the body to breathe and eat and drink and so on, and stopping the body from bringing those things in, so holding your breath, fasting, not drinking, covering yourself, getting out of the sunshine, and so on. Now, the body always reacts to outside forces or information. It's physical, and physical things can react. And it is governed from the outside. It can be forced. You can be arrested and thrown into prison against your will. Right? And if you've ever grown up as a boy, you probably wrestled while you did, and you can find out that you can be controlled. Right? The body can be. And it can be harmed, and harm can come from the outside. So it can be burned and stabbed and slapped and, all of that kind of stuff. So it reacts. It's governed from outside of itself. It can be forced, and it can be harmed from the outside. But when it comes to the spirit, all of those are different. The spirit, yes, it can react, but it can act for itself. The spirit can not only react, but it can act for itself. And the spirit governs itself from the inside. It is never governed from the outside. And the spirit can never be forced. And it cannot be harmed from the outside. It can only harm itself from the inside. Because it's created as a self-governing entity. So these are important things to remember as we move along, right? Because this plays into relationships. This plays into personal mental health. This is going to play into physical health as well. We're just building the foundation. Right? But have a good foundation in order to build the rest of the house. So who is it that can see? What part of you can see? Okay. So the eyes are in the body, and of course it's going to receive physical information, and it's going to transmit that information up to the cortex. You have your ear, and that's in the body, and that's going to receive physical information, and it's going to transmit that information up to the cortex. Your nose and your tongue and your skin and your sensory organs and all that kind of stuff. But that is going to then be received by the spirit. It's going to be evaluated by the spirit And it's the spirit that can see, hear, smell, taste, and feel. Right? The body can't itself feel anything. It can receive information, but it can't itself understand or interpret or come to some conclusion based upon that information. Again, a conclusion is only something that's spiritual, that's a spiritual capacity. Right? And then based upon that, there's going to be a decision, and that's sent back to the body, whether you're going to remove the hand from the hot surface, whether you're going to dodge the ball that's being thrown at your head, whether you're, whatever that sensation comes, then the spirit is going to give a command to the body in order for the body to do something in response to that, and then the body will respond. So the body receives and transmits physical information. It's the spirit that interprets it, that senses, and then determines how to respond. Again, these processes do not happen separate from each other. It's together. It's only together. And so it's a process of the mind. So without a spirit, there is no consciousness, there are no thoughts, there are no spiritual needs, there's no judgment, morality, responsibility, there's no spirituality or ideologies, there's no sensory perception, there's no opportunity to learn, to teach, to educate. There are no voluntary bodily movements. All of those are evidences that you and I have a spirit. Now, do you need love? Yes. So, what is the definition of a need? Okay, you can't live without it. Yeah, something you must have to survive, but also which you cannot produce. Like if you could just, you need oxygen, but you produce all the oxygen you need, then, well, what's that? It's not really a need. So, can you produce love? No. All right. Is that just our problem in this room, or is that everybody's problem? That's everyone's problem, right? So there's not a single human being. How many people need love? Everyone. How many people can produce love? No one. Yeah. We make one of those relationship comments. You have never, ever loved anyone with your love. You have never, ever loved anyone with your love. Because you can't produce it, you can't create it, you simply need it. It's not yours. If you have ever loved anyone, it wasn't with your love. It was with, had to be from the source. Yeah. It's true for every creature. So, do you need a love that is full or incomplete? Do you need love that's constant or intermittent? Do you need a love that's unselfish or selfish? Do you need a love that's personal or impersonal? All right, so we need a love that's full, constant, unselfish, and personal. Where have you ever found that in another person? Anybody been looking there? And looking in another person to find that? Yeah, and you didn't find it? Yeah, and you expected that you would be able to supply their need as well? And you couldn't? Yeah. We're born delusional. We're born delusional. So, do you need a respect that respects you partially or completely? Do you need someone to respect you some of the time or all of the time? Do you need someone to respect you because they can get something from you or so that they can give to you? So that they can give right to you. And you want somebody to respect you because they have to or because they want to? Yeah. So you need a respect that respects you completely, constantly, so that it can give because it wants to. That's the kind of respect you need. Do you need an understanding that understands you partially or completely? Huh? Completely. Do you need somebody to understand you some of the time or all of the time? All the time. Do you need somebody to understand you for what they can get from you or for what they can give to you? Yeah, for what they can give to you. And do you need somebody to understand you because they have to or because they want to? Want to, right? So you need an understanding that understands you completely, constantly, for your sake because they want to. It's voluntary. Right? That's what you need. So every spiritual need you have, you need it completely. Partial will never work, right? And intermittent will never work. Forced or coerced will never work. Ulterior motives will never work. That is not what you need. What you need it constantly, you need it completely, you need it willingly, you need it selflessly. That's exactly how you need everything that you need. So, can something that needs what you need be the source of what you need? No, of course not. Can another human who needs what you need be the source of what you need? No. Can another tree be the source of what another tree needs? No. So if you take one tree and you pull its roots out of the ground and you put its roots in the second tree, and then you take the second tree and you pull its roots out of the ground and you put its roots in the third tree, and you keep doing that with the next tree, next tree, next tree, next tree, next tree, and you get all the trees and you pull them out and they all have their roots in each other, what's going to happen to all the trees? Yeah, they're all going to die. Okay? So, who or what is the source of the love and respect and understanding and every spiritual need that you have that is complete, constant, voluntary, and unselfish? It cannot be another human. And it cannot be multiple other humans. It could be the whole population of humanity. It's still not sufficient because everybody in humanity has the same needs because we're the same creatures. Right? So it must be something that is full of love and respect and understanding that constantly, voluntarily, and unselfishly offer these things to you for your sake. That's what the source must be. There's no option. Or we die. Right? But we're still alive. So there has to be the source. Right? There has to be the source. And that source is God. Right? He is unselfish. He is everything that you need. He has everything you need. He supplies it for you willingly. He wants it for you. He has an ample supply, and it is constant, it is full, it is exactly what you need. Right? And yes, God is complete in and of himself. He is the only one that is independent because he has no needs. If you have needs, then you're dependent upon something. God has no needs, so he is truly independent. Right? There's nothing that he is dependent upon. And yes, God has created creation, and in creation there are channels. Everything in creation takes to give. And so you have one channel taking to another channel, taking to another, to another, to another, and all of creation ends up coming back to God in a great circuit. Everything functions as a circuit. And some might argue, well, what was the cause of God? Because some people argue that. Well, what was the cause of God then? Well, if the cause has a cause, then it's not a cause. Right? That's an effect. So the cause must have no cause. Right? So there is no cause for God. He is the cause. Right? He is where everything comes from. And every circuit must have something that powers that circuit, and God is the power for that. Now, your spirit or your mind, again, functioning like a channel, it takes and at the input, and it gives at the output, and at the cause is at the beginning, and the effect is at the end, at the giving. Right? And the spirit, again, is dependent. It's part of creation. It functions according to the fundamental law, and so it has needs that must be met from outside of itself, supplied from outside of itself. The spirit is active, not passive, so it must actively take for itself. It's not a passive process, and it cannot be passively filled from the outside. You cannot just wait for God to fill you with love. If you do, it's not going to happen, because it must be an active taking. It's not a passive filling. The Spirit doesn't work that way. And then it must be an active giving as well. And then the Spirit is also internally self-governing. It cannot. It controls itself from the outside. It controls itself from the inside. It cannot be controlled from the outside. That's how your Spirit functions. And the Spirit then evaluates information. It's going to take in that information, and the very beginning of the Spirit is identity. Who am I? The very beginning of the Spirit is identity. You function according to identity. That's the very core of function. And we also have the capacity of conscience, where we evaluate good versus evil. We have the capacity of will, where there's decision or choice. You have the capacity of heart, which is where we evaluate gain versus loss. You have the capacity of intellect, which is where you have your worldview, the information you've already obtained so far, and what the picture looks like, and how you compare everything else to that. You have reason, where you can evaluate cause and effect and cause. And you have imagination, where you can take information and you can rearrange it. And that's what imagination is taking existing information and rearranging it. But what do you need in order for all of those capacities to function? In order to determine good versus evil, gain versus loss, cause versus effect, who you are, and so on. All right, there has to be a certain pre-information that you have that you're using as the standard. You have to have a standard that all of these capacities use in order to evaluate now the information that comes in. So you have to have a pre-information that you use as a standard. And I would propose to you that this would be the standard, right? The law of God, unchangeable, fixed standard. And when it's the correct standard, then truth is going to be evaluated according to these capacities, and the outcome is that you will do what is right. When you have the correct standard, when truth comes, you're going to do it. Now again, you were created to always accept what you believe is truth. You were created to always go for what you perceive as good. You were created to always do what you understand is gain. You are never motivated by a lie, what you believe is a lie. You're never motivated by what you perceive as evil, and you are never motivated by what you understand is a loss. Never. And the only way that you can go in the wrong direction is by being in a state of deception, by in a delusional state, thinking the wrong direction is the right direction. Then you pursue loss, but you think you're pursuing gain. Then you pursue lies, but you think you're pursuing the truth. And then you perceive evil, but you think you're pursuing good. So you can never consciously, knowingly pursue evil. You cannot consciously, knowingly pursue loss. You cannot consciously, knowingly pursue lies. It's impossible. You were not created with that capacity. But you can only do so in the state of delusion. Right? So, if you have the right standard and error comes, information of error comes, well, it's going to be evaluated according to the proper standard, and you're not going to do the wrong. Right? That's going to be the outcome. So as long as you have the right standard, truth comes, you're going to do it. Error comes, you're not going to do it. Right? That's beautiful. It's the way God created it to be. Right? But what happens if we have the wrong standard? In technical terms, right, everything falls apart. Everything falls apart. And so now the truth is brought in, and it's evaluated wrong, and we're going to not do the right. Right? So truth comes, and we're not going to do what's right. because we have the wrong standard that we're evaluating things by. And then error is going to come, and we're going to do what's wrong because we have the wrong standard, or the wrong standard. It's only when we have the right standard that the information is brought in and it will be done right. Now, the mind or the spirit is going to take that information, it's going to evaluate it, and then it will be the will, through its choice or decision, that is going to put or begin the electrical activity in the brain. So it's the will that really is generating the electrical activity for the brain and putting the body into action associated with the decisions that are made. And will comes at the end of the channel after information has already been evaluated. So you don't ever make a choice before you evaluate information. You always make a choice after you evaluate information. And that's important. And we'll get to why it's important later. And that's important. What's that? Well, yes. I mean, everybody has a worldview. Right? And the intellect has that worldview. And so, yes. And for most individuals, that worldview is the standard that they use. And so they evaluate everything according to what their prior understanding was. Right? And it's not based upon something that is unchangeable, immovable. It's not based upon law. That the will makes choices after information has already been evaluated. So information must first be accepted and then evaluated before decision. Decision comes after that whole process, not before it. And when we think that it comes before it, then we misunderstand what the will is and what the capacities of the will is. And then we misunderstand a lot of other things in the recovery from our delusional state. Sure, absolutely. So the Holy Spirit is going to be working on the intake side, right? So the Holy Spirit is going to be providing an influence, right? So the Holy Spirit is going to be knocking on the door, right? Providing information and making it available so that if the individual would reach out, that information is available in order for them to take in. Right? So the Holy Spirit functions as an influence, right? An influence in the positive direction. Yes. Yeah. It's kind of like the way that I would say it is that every bit of information that you take in and you believe it's like puzzle pieces that put together a picture, and you start developing a picture of what you see everything to be, and now you're going to discard certain puzzle pieces and you're going to accept other puzzle pieces based upon the picture that you're developing already. Right? That would be your preconceived ideas, that would be your worldview, and for most people, they use that as their standard. That's our default standard. Right? But it's changeable. And since it's changeable, it's like the foundation under that skyscraper or the foundation under that house. It can fall apart, and the whole thing can collapse. Right? It's not an unchangeable standard. So God is a God of love, and He created His intelligent creatures so that they could accept love and they could give love. Right? So they could be a channel of that love. And there is no other source of love than God, so all creatures are bound to God for love. All creatures are bound to Him for love. And He loves us voluntarily. There's no obligation. There's no force. And when we accept His love, then we will love voluntarily and not out of obligation or force. There is never obligation. There is never force in love. It's excluded based on the very principle of love and what it is. So in love, we are left free, right? And our actions are in harmony with God's love and His will, and all things work as they were designed to work, and we have love and joy and purpose and peace and pleasure and so on. All of those are the result of functioning how God created us to function. And again, another way of illustrating this, God created intelligent creatures to govern themselves, and we always govern ourselves according to identity. That's the very beginning of self-governance. It's the very beginning of the function of the Spirit is identity. But everything that is needed is outside of us. So love and information and truth and harmony and security and everything that we need is outside of us. And yet we are created so that nothing that we need can be forced into us from a spiritual standpoint. Physically, yes, the physical can be forced. Spiritual can never be forced. So anything that you need, any information, any love, any harmony, any security, and so on, cannot be forced into you. It's you yourself that must reach out and bring it in. Just as only you can breathe for yourself, only you can eat for yourself, only you can drink for yourself, only you can think for yourself. Only you can bring it in. Now, what is that bringing in process? Well, everything that you need must have a source where it comes from. And God created all of His intelligent creatures with trust, and trust is the binding of yourself to your source. Right? It's by trust that you bind yourself to your source. And then faith is what takes what that source offers and brings it in. Right? So everybody has trust, everybody has faith. There's no question about it. Some people question whether they have faith. No, you've got it. People question whether they have trust. No, you've got it. It's just in our delusion we're putting it in the wrong place. And we'll cover that more tomorrow. All right. But God created us so that He, being the source of everything that we need, He created us with trust in Himself, bound to Him by trust, and by faith taking what we need from Him. And when you take, and the identity being a child of God, that's the true identity. And when you take what you need from God, then your needs are fulfilled, and that's pleasurable. It's pleasurable to fulfill your needs. But He didn't create us to only take. The fundamental law says that everything takes in order to give, right? So you give as well, and so what you took determines what you give. If you take love, you're going to give love. If you take respect, you're going to give respect. If you take honor, you're going to give honor. And the giving is pleasurable as well. It's not only pleasurable to take, but it's pleasurable to give. And God made it to function that way so that we would never be forced. We would always be free. We could participate in love, and we could come and we could take the love that we need and give it away to others, and it would be pleasurable all along the way. That's how He created us to function. And in the beginning, that's how Adam functioned. He understood that he was a child of God. He, by trust, bound to God, and by faith took what he needed from God. And as a channel, he did so, he took, and he gave to the rest of creation. But Adam noticed something. What did he notice? Okay. So he noticed that Mr. Lion had Mrs. Lion, and Mr. Giraffe had Mrs. Giraffe, and Mr. Hippo had Mrs. Hippo, and so on and so forth. And he noticed that they could work together and they could share in common tasks. Right? They could work together for a task, and he looked at himself and he went, oh, I'm alone. Right? From a working together task standpoint. Now, who did Adam have as his source? God. Was God insufficient as a source for Adam? No, because God has how many of Adam's needs? All of them. So Adam was completely fulfilled from the standpoint of the taking. But where was he not fulfilled? The giving. Right? Because he didn't have someone else with the same nature in order for him to give to. So you can talk to your cat about how wonderful the sunrise was. But the cat doesn't have the capacity to appreciate how beautiful the sunrise was. Now, if you smell some catnip and you go, all right, and you smell, let the cat smell, cat's going to be well, they can appreciate that, but you can't appreciate sunrise and sunset and beautiful flowers and other things like that. And so Adam didn't have somebody with the same capacities and qualities to be able to share with, to give to. But he was not lacking on the taking side. And God said it is not good that man should be alone. Not because Adam needed a woman to supply his need on the taking side. No, but that he needed somebody to be a partner with him on the giving side so that he could give and they could share and they could work together in a particular work to accomplish. Mm-hmm. So then God put Adam to sleep and he made Eve out of Adam's rib. Interestingly enough, for both of them, he created them individually, not together. Why? So that both could experience that their needs are completely filled by God alone, that they could be complete with God as far as all of their needs are, their taking needs are concerned. But she also noticed, well, Mr. Moose had Mrs. Moose, and so on and so forth throughout creation, and she also recognized that there was something missing. She didn't have somebody of her same character and qualities to be able to share with and to be able to accomplish things together. And so then God essentially resurrected Adam, and now both of them could take from God as their source, give to each other from what they had taken to the capacity that God created them to do so. And then they were complete, right, as God created them to be. So we need to be careful how we interpret even what we read in the Bible. Now, is there anything wrong in the Bible? No. But can we interpret things wrong in the Bible? Oh, yeah. You betcha. Right? And so we get things backwards because we see things backwards. Now, the law of God is the standard. And every thou shalt not essentially tells us don't take from here, don't take like this. Don't take from false gods. There aren't any. You'll be empty. Don't take from idols. They don't have anything you need. You'll be empty. Don't take God's name in vain, because if you do so, it shows you weren't taking from God. You're empty. Don't take your life from here. Don't take your intimacy from here. Don't take your stuff from here. Don't take your reputation or your identity or whatever from here. Don't even think about taking from here. Don't take from here. Don't take like this. So that leaves us with the fourth and the fifth commandment. And how many stones were there? There were two. There's a reason there were two stones. Right? There's a reason. There's a letter of the law and there's a spirit of the law. The letter of the law is in the 10 Commandments that you can read and the words that you can read with it. The spirit of the law is found on the two tables. Why are there two tables? Okay, love for God or love for man, yes. What is love for God and what is love for man? Taking and giving. Love for God is always taking. Always. Always taking. Love for man? Always giving. It's always giving. And the fourth commandment says that we should rest, right? Are you rested when you're suffocating? Are you rested when you're starving? Are you rested when you're dehydrating? No, you're only rested when your needs are met, when they're satisfied. So the fourth commandment tells us, satisfy yourself. Take, fill up, so that you're full, right? And when you take and you're full and you're satisfied, now you can be at rest. Sabbath is a sign that you have God as your source, that you have been taking from Him. He has supplied your need. You are full, you are satisfied, now you can Sabbath. Right? But can you satisfy your needs by hyperventilating on one day of the week and holding your breath the rest of the week? Now, can you satisfy your needs by eating 7 days of food on one day and then not eating the other days? No, does it work that way? No. So Sabbath is a sign that you have been filling up from God all of the time. You're connected to Him, you're taking from Him, He's your source, you're full with what God has all of the time, and Sabbath is just a time to bask in that, right? And to acknowledge that and recognize it and so on. Now, fifth commandment tells us to what? Honor father and mother. Is that taking from them or giving to them? Giving to them, right? So it's taking to give. That's right. And the one you take from, you are dependent upon, and the one you give to, you are independent of. Let's say you're looking for some wonderful property, and you find this nice place for sale in the middle, and you've got neighbors upstream and downstream, and this one's for sale, and it's just the right price. And so you buy it. You know? Whatever little amount you've got, they'll take it. And you've got all this wonderful water. You can water your crops. You've got hydroelectric power. You can, shower with it, drink it, and all that kind of stuff. One day your neighbor downstream from you decides they're going to start a factory, and they suck this water out through the factory and stick this mucky stuff in there, and it goes on downstream. Does that directly affect you? No. You got all the clean water that you want. You can do all the same things that you want to. They just messed it up there. What if your neighbor upstream from you decides they're going to do the same thing? Does that directly affect you? Yes. You are dependent upon the one you take from. You are not dependent upon the one you give to. Right? So the taking determines what you are going to give. And if they're downstream from you, well, that's their problem. But if they're upstream from you, where did I go? All right, if they're upstream from you, that's my problem. Right? So let's apply this to relationships. So who should be upstream? And who should be downstream? All right, God upstream, others downstream. Because the one that you take from, you're dependent upon, and what they have, you will take it, and that's what you can give. So if you have God upstream, He's good, you'll get the good that He has, and that's what you'll give. But if you have other people upstream from you, they're not good, because the Bible says there's none that does good, no, not one. That's what you're going to take, and that's what you're going to give without a choice. You can't help what you give. It's dependent upon what you take. The problem is not the giving, the problem is the taking. If you have a problem with what words come out of your mouth, if you have a problem with what attitude comes out of your body language and the tone of your voice, if you have a problem with this, that, or the other thing, that is not the problem. That's only the manifestation of the problem. The problem is, where are you taking? Who are you taking from? What is your source? That's the problem. But if you have God as your source, and if you don't take from Him, you don't have anything to give. But if you take and you try to keep it to yourself, well, that's just going to destroy everything, and you're still not going to be very helpful to others. Right? It only works as you take to give. And that's what the law shows, that we are to take to give, we are to be a channel, and love is taking everything that I need from God and then giving it freely to others. That's what love is. And it's defined by the law. It's taking everything that I need from God and giving it freely to others. And I do so with the identity that I'm a child of God. Now, yeah. Mm-hmm. That love is God? No. No. Love comes from God. Yes, so love comes from God, but love is not God. Right? Just as justice comes from God, but justice is not God. And righteousness comes from God, but righteousness is not God. Holiness comes from God, but holiness is not God. God is beyond those things. They do come from Him. They are consistent with Him and His character and His nature, but He is more than just that. Right? It's kind of like saying a square is a quadrilangle, or what's the easier term? Huh? Yeah, it's quadrilateral, or anyway. So yeah, a long time ago. Um, anyway, so yes, a square is a quadrilateral object, but so is a rectangle. So a quadrilateral object is not necessarily a square. A square is a quadrilateral object, but a quadrilateral object is more than just a square. You know. Yeah. So, all right, pulling this down to health very quickly, so we can go home and sleep, and maybe not. You might be chewing on this stuff through the night time. But anyways, every cell in your body functions according to the law. It takes to give. It has to have resources. The resources, the fuel is chemicals, right? That it has to take in. Those come into the body through a certain organ system, and they have to be in a certain quantity, and it's the blood that takes it to all the different parts of the body. And so the life of the flesh is in the blood because the blood carries the fuel. And if there's a problem with the circulation, there's going to be a problem with certain parts of the body where that happens, right? And it has to be in a certain concentration. If it's too little, the cells won't get what it needs. If it's too much, they're going to take too much than what they need, and it's not going to function the way that it's supposed to. But again, there has to be the electrical component of it as well, and the electrical component of it comes through the nervous system, but it comes ultimately through spiritual information, because we're spiritual as well, that is brought in by the Spirit, made available to the brain, that transmitted down the nerves to the cells of the body. It releases chemicals. The cells take in those chemicals, and then they change how they regulate or how they function. And you and I, it's the soul that thinks, which is the spirit and the brain together. And God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And God is the God of truth. So what kind of information did God create the mind to think upon in order to control the functions of the body correctly? Truth. So in truth is the basis of the information that you take in. Remember, truth puts things in the right order so that it functions. So in truth is the information that the Spirit takes in and makes available to the body through these pathways. Then it results in proper function of the cells and tissues and organ systems and so on of the body. It can control it well. But what happens if it's lies or error as the foundation of that information that is brought in by the Spirit? Well, that's going to be sent through the same pathway in the same way and to whatever location it goes to, and it's going to result in dysfunction. Right? Because error puts things in the wrong order so that it doesn't work. Right? So when error is the basis of our thinking, then it's going to result in dysfunction of things that are happening in the body, and it will manifest itself. The mind can lie. It can be deceived, but the body can never be deceived. Nothing physical can be deceived. The computer can't be deceived. The podium can't be deceived or anything like that. I can type on the computer, "You are a monkey." And my computer will show up on the screen, "You are a monkey." And it can be projected on the projector, and it can say, "You are a monkey." But the projector is not lying. It's telling the exact truth of what was put into it. The computer is not lying. It is telling the exact truth of what was put into it. My fingers weren't lying. They were doing exactly the information that was put into them. Right? The muscles and all that kind of stuff. Where was the lie? Yeah, in the source, in the spirit, right? So it's the spirit or the mind that can be deceived. The body can never be deceived. So the body will always reveal what is put into it. And remember, if it's a good cause, it will be a good effect. If it's a bad cause, it'll be a bad effect. So when you see a bad effect coming in the body, question what's going on in the mind. Remember, how many things happen because of thought? Everything. Everything happens because of thought. We don't usually see this in the medical community. We focus on the physical aspects of things, but really when we look at it, we come down and we realize, oh, it has to do with thought. It has to do with truth. It has to do with love. It has to do with these vital components that has a significant impact upon the body and disease and health and so on. And if we don't get to these issues, poor us. We'll just try to put better fruit and better vegetables and better things into our mouth. And we'll have better fuel for the vehicle, and the driver will still be drunk. And it still ends up badly. Yeah. All right, well, let's pray. I've kept you long enough. And, yeah, probably so much to cover this weekend. It takes a little while to turn somebody's world upside down and see things from a different perspective. And tomorrow's going to be a whirlwind. I mean, it's going to be really, we're going to turn things upside down. But let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your blessings and your goodness to us. Thank you that there is truth out there, and that there is function, and that you are out there, and that you are exactly what we need. Lord, open our eyes and help us to see how things function. Help us to understand how we function. Help us to see the dysfunction that we're in clearly. And, Lord, help us to understand also the solution that you provide, that we might be free. And this we pray and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.